try changing up the angle a bit, so if it looks a bit weird, just ignore it. We're just trying new things right now because December's finally over. It's time for a December wrap up. I read 9 books in December, so I did really well. I was in a massive reading slump for like 3 or 4 months. It was bad. The last month I like actually read several books in a month was September, so October and November didn't do shit. But December, I came back strong. I'm surprised I read 9 books. I mean, granted, 3 of these are comics, so they're pretty short, but everything else was a full-length book. So 6 full-length books. I'm proud of myself. The first book I read in December was A Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret. A Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. That's a hard name for me to pronounce and I don't know why. I gave this book 4 stars and I think that is a bit high, but let me kind of explain that. So I started reading it in, I believe it was October, maybe even September. I started reading this a while ago. But I didn't finish it until December because I wasn't reading at all. So I read about half of this several months ago and then I finished the rest in December. So I didn't fully remember everything that had happened in the book. I remember I was enjoying it, but I wasn't loving it. And then that's kind of how I felt throughout the rest of the book. I was enjoying it, but I wasn't loving it. This is a standalone, and so it's a lot of, I guess, like introducing you to characters, places, and things because they don't have other books to be able to do that. And I don't really read a lot of fantasy standalone, so this was kind of a new venture for me. But I did enjoy, like, the world, the characters, and everything, but I felt like sometimes, like, there wasn't either enough plot or just nothing was happening to progress the plot because you were trying to get to know characters and all of that. So that kind of took away from my enjoyment. I still did like it, but I don't know, like, fully how I feel about it, so I'm kind of like conflicted. I think 4 stars is fine, and I do want to try rereading this eventually in the future to fully formulate my thoughts, and I probably will be reading the, I think it's like a sequel, but it's supposed to be a novella. I don't fully remember, but I probably will read that because I did like the world, I did like the characters, but as of right now, my brain's a bit jumbled on this because I read it over such a long period of time. The next book I read in December was Heartless by Marissa Meyer. I gave this book 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I was shocked by how much I loved it. So I'm not a huge Alice in Wonderland fan. I do like elements of it, but as a whole, I've never fully enjoyed it. I don't really like adaptations of it all that much either. I think they're pretty basic. But this, like, I felt like Marissa Meyer really understood the world and made it even more whimsical and crazy, and I loved it. Because I feel like some previous Alice in Wonderland retellings, whatever, or even the original source material, I felt like it was whimsical, but they didn't know where the whimsy was going, so it was just like piled on whimsy. Where with this one, I felt like Marissa Meyer knew exactly what types of whimsy she wanted, what type of element she wanted, and really like fleshed it out and ran with it, and it was so well done. I loved everything about this book. I started this one in like October or something and finished it in December, but I only read about 50 to 75 pages in October, so I read most of it in December, so I remember a lot more of it than as opposed to Sorcery of Thorns. Everything about this book was just spot on for me. I don't typically love fantasy romances, so this was kind of a venture for me, but I loved it. I liked that the romance, yes, it was a big part of it, but also wasn't. There were a lot of other elements that really intrigued me, so this was just really phenomenal, and I think I want to do a reread already, even though I literally read it less than a month ago, because it was just so good. So 10 out of 10 would recommend this if you have not read it. Next, I read Suki Alone by Faith Erin Hicks. This is a comic in the Avatar: The Last Airbender comic / graphic novel series. So this is just a simple little standalone. This takes place during season 3 when Suki is at the Boiling Rock prison. If you've seen the show, you know. But I was really excited for this one. Mostly because of the cover, because it's Suki and Avatar Kyoshi, and I thought it was going to be a lot about Suki, like, connecting with herself, and because she's a Kyoshi warrior, like, refinding herself in the warrior elements, if that makes sense. But unfortunately it was not. It was about beans. And I'm not kidding. I thought that because you don't really get Suki a lot in the show, she's in there a bit during season 1 and 2, like very brief, but then season 3 you get more, but still not a lot. So I was really hoping that this would kind of you'd get to know more about Suki as a character and her backstory, which you did get a bit about her backstory, but I felt like it wasn't about Suki, it was about her village and the Kyoshi warriors more so, which is fine, but I wanted more about Suki herself. So I didn't love that. I did end up giving this 2.5 stars, which is unfortunate. Next, I read Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy. Again, this is another comic in the Avatar series. This one, again, I thought it was something different than it actually was. Pretty early on in the story, Toph finds an underground bending like ring match thing. So if you know the show, basically Toph starts out in an underground earthbending like arena basically, and that's how they find her. And so that made me really intrigued, thinking it was like gonna be Toph going back to her roots kind of, and going into what is the beginnings of pro bending. Because she talks about in the beginning of this how she doesn't like the monotony, how do you say that word? The boringness of her day-to-day life. She doesn't love that. She's kind of bored and wants more adventure. She misses like fighting and doing all that stuff she did with Team Avatar in the show. And so I thought it was going to be about her kind of refinding her love for bending and everything through the underground bending rings, but unfortunately it wasn't that. I gave this book 3 stars. It was slightly better than Suki alone, but it still wasn't great. I just thought it was something else and it was not what I wanted, so. Following trend, I read Katara and the Pirate Silver, so again, another one in the Avatar series. This one I gave 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it the most out of these 3 that I read, but it still wasn't phenomenal. This takes place sometime during season 2. I could not tell you exactly when, because it kind of says it in the beginning of it, but I don't remember exactly when that is. But basically, Katara gets separated from the group, and so she's like stranded in a Earth village or Earth Kingdom village that is overrun by Fire Nation, and she's trying to escape. So she teams up with this band of pirates. So I thought it was an interesting premise, and I don't particularly love Katara as a character that much, so I was like, I don't think I'm going to love this one as much as the other 2, but I actually liked this one more. But a lot of that is not due to Katara, it's due to the plot line. I thought it was good, and I liked the pirate crew that she was with, even though they were so minor. I think that they had potential to be something better. Was not my favorite by any means, but it also wasn't terrible. So these 3, if you want more in the Avatar world and you've already read all the other graphic novels, I would maybe suggest reading them just to get more bits and pieces. But I think if you aren't interested in reading the comics in general, I wouldn't recommend these 2, because I think that they're just pretty average stories, average plots, and it really doesn't do much for the characters. The next few books that I read in December were the Inheritance Games trilogy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I have a video on my channel reading this series if you want to watch it, so I won't talk too much about my thoughts on it. But overall, I didn't love this series. I thought it was pretty mediocre at best. The first, the Inheritance Games, I thought was pretty okay. I think it laid some decent bones, but it just wasn't what I wanted. I think it read a bit young for me personally. I originally read this book 2 years ago and I gave it 3 stars, but after rereading it this year, I gave it 2.5 stars. I just think that none of the characters or the plots were anything special, and I felt like it didn't really have any direction to it. Next, we have the Hawthorne Legacy, which is the second book in the series. I gave this one 3 stars. I did like it more than the other 2 books, but it still wasn't my favorite. Primarily, I liked that you got to know more about some characters' dads. In this one, I liked those elements, but I think that that still wasn't even that well done. How I said with the Inheritance Games, I felt like it wasn't really going anywhere. I especially felt that in this one. Like, you can see like things are kind of building up, but then nothing is like connecting, and it felt like the author wasn't trying to connect stuff. It just kind of felt like disjointed throughout the whole series, and it was just kind of odd for me. I felt like there were bits and pieces that were good, but like they were never fleshed out, and then it just primarily focused on these character romances, which I wasn't really a fan of. The last one is the Final Gambit, and I gave this book 2 stars. I disliked it the most out of the whole series. This one just really pissed me off. I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is 100% true, so if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I read somewhere that the author didn't know whether this was going to be a trilogy or not. So I think you could really tell that with this one, that nothing was wrapping up and concluding. It's like a mystery series. It should be like kind of, you know, wrapping up and all of that, but it didn't. Like, yes, technically it did wrap up, but it wasn't satisfying at all. A bit of a spoiler is basically the man who left his money to Avery, our main character, he basically just predicted the future. That was what happened. And I think it was garbage. I think it was such a poor storyline. Like, nobody can predict the future. It was just really poorly done to me. I felt like nothing made sense. And it wasn't working. It wasn't connecting. So did not love this series overall. And then the last book that I read in December was The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. This is the second book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. I gave this book 3 stars, and I'm going to be entirely honest, I don't remember a lot of the book, even though I read it about a week ago, or probably less than a week ago, because I read it entirely at work. I wasn't fully paying attention to it, and the parts that I was paying attention to, I didn't love. So I felt because I didn't really pay attention, it wasn't fair for me to rate it low. So I gave it 3, which is in the middle. I talked about Once Upon a Broken Heart, I think, in a video before, where there were elements to that book that I enjoyed, but as a whole, I didn't like it. And that's the same with this book. I'm so conflicted with this series because I think Stephanie Garber is a good writer. She has very, at least in Once Upon a Broken Heart, I think her writing is very atmospheric. Like, I feel like I'm there. I feel like I can visualize everything, and it's really well done. But I don't like her characters, and I don't love all of her plot lines. So for me, it's like, I really dislike a lot of elements of these books, but I also like other elements, so I don't fully know how I feel altogether. So that's why I read the second one, because I didn't love the first book, but I wanted to see where it went. And again, with this one, I didn't love this book, but I still think I'm going to finish the series because I'm intrigued, and I don't really know how to explain it. Like, I'm so invested in it, but I'm not at the same time. This book is just, my feelings are very conflicted for it. I just genuinely don't know how I feel. Same with the first book, I was the same way. Because there's so many elements I like, it makes me want to keep going, but then there's so many elements that I dislike that I'm like, why am I putting myself through this? And it's just a very weird feeling. If you feel this way about any books, or like about this book series in particular, please let me know, because I feel so like isolated and alone. I'm like, I don't understand why everybody's rating these books 5 stars. Like, can someone explain it to me? Like, I just feel so conflicted. If you've ever felt conflicted like about a book like this, let me know, because I would like to talk to you and get to know your feelings about something. Even if it's something I've never read, I'm intrigued because I don't know how to explain my thoughts. And I'm like, is this a normal thing? Do other people feel this way? I do not know. Those are all the books that I read in December. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in another one. Peace out.